Hi, thanks for coming to our first Financial Empowerment for Women webinar. Before I begin, I'd just like to make a disclosure. This webinar is being recorded and I must have your consent to continue. If you do not consent on the recording, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the webinar. Again, I just want to thank everybody for coming and listening to this first webinar. Yes, it is on the B word, budgets. And I'm just going to give you a brief introduction. My name is Ed Schuler. I am a chartered financial consultant and an accredited investment fiduciary. Again, first I want to thank everybody to come in here to our first Financial Empowerment for Women webinar. My goal is to inform women about various topics on finance. The objective is to keep it short and sweet, about 20-30 minutes, provide as much information as possible in a short amount of time. And remember, knowledge is power. Some of you may know my background, but for those of you who do not, yes, I am surrounded by women. I have 3 daughters, a spouse, and a 90-year-old mom. My wife and I raise our daughters to become self-sufficient and independent. Sometimes I think they're too self-sufficient and independent, obviously, except when they want something. My mom relied on my dad for everything financially. Even though she worked, she didn't even balance her checkbook. Boy, you should have been at the dinner table for those conversations. Upon my father's passing, all the bills and finances were passed on to me and my wife. The funny thing is, until recently, I didn't even know what our household bills were, and Janet didn't even know what the finances were, as far as the investments, retirements, and things of that nature. So about 2 to 3 years ago, Janet and I got together and we shared information. She found out about the finances, the retirement, and I found out about all the bills and where the monthly expenses were going. I'm sorry we had that conversation. But what I have a program in my office that we are able to aggregate and integrate all this information. So just at a click of a button, she could see what our account values are and how they've been doing. And then I could see also income coming in, expenses going out, and so forth. We tend to discuss these things on a quarterly basis, Jan and I. But every now and then she comes up with some questions. She hears things, and the hot topics today are Bitcoin, AMC, and GameStop. And she tends to ask me a lot about Bitcoin, and as she asks, I know she's learning and picking up some things, so it's pretty cool. So about 3-4 years ago, Denise and I wanted to put a program like this together for women, and I had 2 focus groups, and the focus groups covered all different demographics of women. And we discussed the webinars and what their thoughts were. And I heard certain things like, our fathers always handled the finance. Now our husbands do it. I'm too busy. I'm taking care of the kids. I'm taking care of the household. I'm taking care of my husband. And I'm working. I just don't have time for that. And a friend of mine who I respect dearly gave me she always gives me interesting perspectives and things to think about. And I never forgot this one phrase. She says, "We learn in a crisis." And she called it crisis management. Whether it be death, disability, or sickness, that's when we're ready to rock and roll. We learn on the fly. And I thought, wouldn't you want to be in the know before something like that were to occur, instead of having to scramble? So lately, I've noticed a shift, a movement that women want to be more involved in the finances, want to be treated equally, whether it be at home or in the workplace. or in the world. Let's face it, women are taking up powerful positions in powerful places, and I believe women should be in the know. Are you aware that women control over 51% of the assets in the United States? It's an estimated $22 trillion of net worth. There's some additional information here too. The number of wealthy women in the United States is growing twice as fast as the number of wealthy men. 45% of American millionaires are women. 48% of estates worth more than $5 million are controlled by women, compared with 35% that are controlled by men. 60% of high net worth women have earned their fortunes. Pretty interesting. So anyway, I thought this might be a good time to get this project of educating you about different topics of finances. So get involved. Let's have a conversation. Your feedback is important to me. I prefer this not just be a monologue. So with that being said, let's get going. I want to start by talking about the B word. A couple things I'd like you to think about is when you talk about the B word, and the reason I call it the B word is because I hear a lot of people say that, and a lot of people are not really interested in budgets. They think it's too restrictive, a confinement. They're stuck in a box and they can't get out, so to speak. But that's not typically the case. So the first thing you should really do is you should establish your goals. Differentiate your long-term goals and your short-term goals. So some of the long-term goals would be maybe retirement, maybe to buy a vacation house, to do a renovation on your own house, put the kids through college. And some of your short-term goals might be a vacation, purchasing a car, savings. I like to differentiate your short-term goals are anything from 1 to 3 years, and your long-term goals 4 years plus. After you get an idea of what your goals are, I also want you to take a look at what your income is, all right? So I want you to break down your income, and different ways we could identify and classify income is salaries, wages, commissions, any kind of dividends or interest, child support, alimony, rental income, any pensions, Social Security, annuities, and so forth. After you identify your income, I want you to identify your expenses. Now, I break the expenses down into 2 different categories. The first category is fixed expense, and then the second category is your discretionary expenses. So your fixed expenses would be your housing, your mortgage, your utilities, your taxes, your insurances, cell phones, your homeowner insurance, your auto insurance, your life insurance, your health insurance, how much you spend for food on a monthly basis, transportations, your auto, your loans or your leases, your fuel, your tolls, your parking. What I also want you to take a look at too is also include some savings goals and investments that you may have. I want you to think about one of your fixed expenses as paying yourself first, giving yourself money that you could put away on a monthly basis to either build up an emergency fund or to invest. Another fixed expense could be education for your kids, whether it be a private school or for colleges. Now let's talk about some discretionary income. Your discretionary expenses could be your entertainment, dining out, going to the gym, going to the movies, hobbies, shopping. And the reason I put shopping in there is because I was doing a data collection interview with a client, and the husband's telling me about his hobbies. And so I asked the spouse what her hobbies were, and she looked at me a little bit perplexed, and she said, well, I really don't have any hobbies. I like to shop. Is shopping a hobby? So I put shopping as a hobby, but golf, tennis, cooking, biking, whatever your hobbies may be. Another discretionary expense could be vacations, holidays or birthdays, maybe maintenance for your house or your auto. You may have to replace a roof or an HVAC system, or something happens with your car, tires, whatever the case might be. I also want you to take a look at your credit cards as discretionary income and any non-planned expense that you may have. Now, I have a budget planner form here, and I'm going to have Denise at the end of this presentation email this out. It's an electronic version. It allows you to put in all your income and expenses here, and then at the bottom it will automatically tally what you have left at the end of the month. And hopefully you do have some monies at the end of the month. You know, I had an old colleague of mine, his favorite saying was, do you have money at the end of the month? If so, how much? Or do you have month at the end of the money? And if so, how much? So most of the times, I think you'd rather have money at the end of the month instead of more month at the end of the month. But anyway, and with that being said, some of the resources were to obtain this information. What I'd like you to do is I'd like you to go back and take a look at your checkbook, take a look at your bank statements, and also your credit card statements. Go back in the last 3 months, see where there's a consistency. Take that information down. And as I mentioned before, also try to incorporate your savings and investments into this monthly expense. Now, once you get all this information together and you design your original budget, for the next 3 to 4 months, what I want you to do is I want you to tweak it on an ongoing basis. All right? I want you to make sure that your budget is livable and comfortable. You need to make adjustments to allow for different things and accommodate and have a little bit of flexibility for your lifestyle. Now remember, on an ongoing basis, one of the things I'd like you to do is I'd like you to monitor your budget. Keep in mind, you don't have to track every single penny that you spend, but I want you to be flexible, because remember, a budget that is too rigid is likely to fail. Hopefully, all this information will allow you to live within your means, and it should allow you to be a little bit more accountable for your expenses. There's a couple of tips I'd like to share with you with regards to a budget. I just read this yesterday. Some tips to stay on track. One thing you can do is you can involve the entire family. Agree on a budget up front and meet regularly to check on the progress. One of the hardest things to do, and why most people do not follow budgets, is to stay disciplined and try to make it a part of your daily routine. When starting a budget, when's the best time to start a budget? I really wouldn't start it before the holidays, maybe the first of the year, maybe in September. But if you start right before the holidays, you may have some issues with maintaining it. And find a budgeting system that fits your needs. So whether it be this piece of paper, whether it be a software, and realize that budgets are a lot of work. They're a lot of work to get started. They're a lot of work to tweak and find that happy medium. And then there are a lot of work to stay disciplined to your budget. Distinguish between expenses that are wants and expenses that are needs. Designer shoes versus groceries. New car versus used car. Build rewards into your budget. Make sure that you can eat out every week. Make sure that you can bring the kids to the movies or get ice cream or whatever the case might be. Avoid using credit cards to pay for everyday expenses. It may seem like you're spending less, but your credit card debt will continue to increase. Funny story, my daughter was using her credit cards, and at the end of the month she goes, "Oh, I got a bill for $1,200. Kind of snuck up on her. She wasn't expecting it. So try to avoid using your credit card for everyday expenses. Do not set unrealistic expectations. If you have a partner, make it a team sport. Get them involved as well too. You know, I have a young client. He just graduated college. Started working for this company. Moved out of the house, got a 2-bedroom, 2-bath house, was living on his own, and realized if he could rent one of his rooms, he could get another $600 a month. So he just reduced his expenses by $600 a month and increased his income by $600 a month. There's another interesting technique that you could use. It's called the envelope planner. So let's say you have a goal, and your goal is to put $200 away a month to pay down your mortgage, or to pay down your bills, or whatever that case might be. On your envelope, put what your goal is, and every 2 weeks when you get paid, or weekly when you get paid, take that amount of money and put it in the envelope. And you can have 3 or 4 or 5 different envelopes, whatever works best for you. At the end of the month, take that money and pay towards your mortgage, or your debt, or your car, whatever the case might be. That's called the envelope planner. There's another program out there called a 50-30-20 plan. 50% of your income you designate towards all your necessities. 30% on your wants, and then 20% on debt repayment. I've known a couple people that have used that, and it's actually worked. I also know a couple people that use the envelope planner too, and it's worked. So with that being said, does anybody have any questions? I see one question coming up on the chat. Okay. The question was actually regarding shopping. What happens if I want to purchase something and it's not in my budget, or it is more expensive than what I budgeted for? How can I purchase that item? That's a good question. Sometimes you may have to make adjustments in your budget. And if you really want this particular item, you may have to give up something else to allow for this purchase. So it's just called asset adjustments. Okay. I might not eat for a day to buy this item, whatever that item might be. So that's one way of doing it. Oh, another question popped up. What happens if my goals are too high and they're unattainable? I wouldn't say that you should forget about those goals. Maybe find a way to reach those goals. Again, your goals should be realistic, as I mentioned earlier, but figure out a way that you might be able to obtain and reach that goal, or maybe just scale that goal down a little bit so it is attainable or reachable. Again, these things are flexible, so you have to provide some flexibility within your budget and within your day-to-day living. Does anybody have any other questions? So I'm going to do a brief recap, okay? Establish your goals. Define your long-term and your short-term goals. Identify your income, and also know what your expenses are, your fixed expenses and your discretionary expenses. Identify your resources of where you could find all this information, your checkbook, your bank statement, your credit cards. Make adjustments, monitor your budget on an ongoing basis, try to live within your means, account for raises and income increases, incorporate that within your budget. And make sure that your budget is flexible, livable, and obtainable. Now, like I mentioned to you earlier, we are having a series of webinars. The next webinar is going to be July 15th, which is a Thursday, and it's about managing debt. I have a whole lineup of topics. After managing debt, it's going to be savings, investing, and other topics as well too. If you have some topics, I'd also like you to send them to me. At the end of this seminar, at the end of this webinar, we're also going to send you a survey. It's very important to me that you fill out the survey. On the survey, another important question is, do you prefer to do this on webinars, or do you prefer to do it in person? Or maybe a combination of both, I don't know. Anyway, any questions, please email us. Denise is going to be getting out the budget form to you along with the survey. Very important to me that you complete the survey and get that back to me. Your input is important. Thank you. Have a great night. And again, any questions, you could feel free and email me. Bye now.